The ship moved silently through the vast emptiness of space. As Daniel stood near the observation window, looking at the stars scattered like diamonds across the darkness. He was not new to space travel, yet the view still left him in awe every time. Daniel was part of a small exploration crew searching for habitable worlds and lost civilizations. The mission had been routine so far, with nothing special to report, but everything changed when the ship's scanners picked up something unusual near the edge of an uncharted star system. The captain called the crew together and explained that a faint energy signal was coming from a drifting object not far from their current position. It was large enough to be a vessel, but its design did not match any human or allied species records. The crew decided to investigate, and soon Daniel found himself boarding a shuttle with two others heading toward the mysterious ship. As the shuttle approached the derelict vessel, the scale of it became clear. It was enormous and elegant in its construction, with smooth curves and glowing patterns across its hull, though much of the light was flickering weakly as if the ship was on its last breath. The airlock was still functional, and the team entered cautiously, flashlights sweeping through the dark corridors. Daniel felt a chill run down his spine as he moved deeper inside. The place was eerily silent, and every step echoed in the metallic hallways. Then they heard it, a faint sound like a soft hum coming from a chamber up ahead. When they entered the room, Daniel's eyes widened in surprise. In the middle of the chamber stood a figure unlike any he had ever seen before. She was tall and slender, with pale shimmering skin that seemed to glow faintly in the darkness. Her large luminous eyes regarded them calmly, and her presence was strangely comforting despite the alien features. The others froze, unsure how to react, but Daniel felt an odd pull toward her. He could sense that she was not hostile. She raised a delicate hand, and without moving her lips, Daniel heard a voice inside his mind. It was gentle and melodic as it introduced itself as Lyra. Daniel looked around quickly to see if the others had heard it too, but they clearly had not. The voice was speaking directly to him. Lyra explained that she was the last survivor of this ship. Her crew had been attacked, and she had barely escaped with her life. She had been in a form of stasis for weeks, waiting for someone to find her. Daniel felt a surge of empathy for her situation. He stepped closer and asked if she was injured or needed help, but Lyra shook her head slowly. She said she could heal on her own, but there was something far more important that she wished to share. She spoke about a skill her species possessed called mind bonding. It was a deep mental connection that allowed two beings to share emotions, memories, and even abilities. It was something sacred among her people, and rarely attempted with outsiders. But now, stranded and with no one left, she wanted to teach Daniel. She could sense his curiosity and kindness, and believed he had the strength required. Daniel's heart pounded at the thought. The idea of someone entering his mind and seeing everything he had ever felt or done was intimidating. But there was also something about Lyra's calm presence that made him feel safe. He asked what mind bonding would require, and she explained it needed complete trust. Both minds had to open fully without holding back any secrets or fears. Only then could the bond form. The crew members with Daniel exchanged wary glances. They did not understand what was happening because Lyra was speaking only to Daniel's mind. One of them whispered that maybe they should leave and report back to the captain, but Daniel shook his head. Something inside told him this moment was important, not just for him, but for their entire mission. He stepped forward and told Lyra that he would accept her offer. Lyra's luminous eyes seemed to brighten as if a hidden hope had just been awakened. She asked him to return with her to their ship, where she would begin teaching him the first steps. Daniel nodded, though part of him was nervous. He had no idea what he was walking into, but a deep instinct urged him forward. As they prepared to leave the derelict vessel, Daniel looked back at the empty corridors and wondered how many stories they held of Lyra's lost people. He could feel her sadness in the way she moved quietly behind him, and for the first time, he wished he could already perform this mind bonding she spoke of so he could truly understand her pain. When they reached the exploration ship, the captain was surprised to see the alien guest but allowed her aboard after Daniel vouched for her intentions. Lyra carried herself with grace and spoke little, though Daniel could feel faint whispers of her emotions brushing against his consciousness. It was as if she was already testing the connection. Later that night, Daniel sat alone in the quiet observation deck when Lyra approached him. She did not speak aloud, but once again her voice filled his thoughts, telling him that the lessons would begin soon. Daniel felt a mix of anticipation and fear. He wondered what it would be like to let someone see every memory, every failure, and every dream he had ever had. But when he met Lyra's glowing eyes, he knew he would go through with it. The stars outside the window shone brighter than ever, as if the universe itself was watching what was about to unfold. Daniel took a deep breath and nodded to Lyra, silently signaling that he was ready for whatever came next. Daniel woke early the next morning feeling a strange restlessness in his chest, as if something was calling him. He knew it was time to begin whatever Lyra had promised. The ship was quiet, except for the soft hum of the engines as it traveled through the void. He found Lyra waiting in a small meditation chamber the crew had prepared for her. She stood still, like a statue, her glowing eyes closed as if already deep in concentration. When she sensed Daniel's presence, she opened her eyes and gestured for him to sit opposite her on the smooth floor. He hesitated for a moment, then obeyed, feeling a sudden nervousness about what was to come. Lyra spoke softly, her voice echoing directly in his mind, again explaining that the first lesson would be simple but important. He needed to learn how to quiet his thoughts, because a mind full of noise could never form a true bond. Daniel tried to do as she instructed, but it was harder than he expected. Every time he closed his eyes, thoughts came rushing in, memories of his life, images of his crew, and even random worries about the future. He shifted uncomfortably and opened his eyes, admitting that he could not stop thinking. Lyra looked at him with patience and told him not to force it, but to focus instead on his breathing, letting each breath wash away the clutter in his head. He tried again, this time following the rhythm she demonstrated, and slowly the storm inside his mind began to calm. Daniel was surprised to feel Lyra's presence more clearly as the noise faded. It was like a warm light glowing just at the edge of his awareness. She praised him gently, saying that humans carried incredible energy in their emotions, but also let that energy scatter too easily. To bond, he would need to channel it like a river flowing in one direction. As the lesson continued, Daniel felt the first faint threads of connection forming between them. He began to sense flickers of Lyra's feelings, sadness, longing, and a quiet hope that she had not shown before. At first it startled him, but Lyra told him to stay calm and simply observe. She then opened herself a little more, and Daniel was suddenly flooded with an image of a vast alien city, gleaming with towers of crystal and light. It was so real he almost gasped out loud. The image vanished as quickly as it came, leaving Daniel shaken. Lyra explained that what he saw was a memory from her people's homeworld. She said this was only a tiny taste of what mind bonding could do. In the final stages, they would be able to share entire lives in an instant. Daniel felt a mixture of awe and fear, but also excitement. He asked her why she had chosen him for this, and Lyra replied that she had sensed something unique in his mind from the moment they met. Humans were unpredictable yet incredibly adaptable, and she believed he could master the bond faster than any other species. They trained for hours each day, and Daniel began to notice changes in himself. He could feel Lyra's presence even when she was not in the same room, like a soft whisper at the back of his thoughts. Sometimes he would catch glimpses of her emotions when she passed by in the hallway. It was strange but not unpleasant. In fact, it made him feel closer to her than he had ever felt with anyone before. One evening after another intense session, Daniel collapsed back onto the floor exhausted. He told Lyra he was not sure he could handle the next stage, but she knelt beside him and assured him that he was progressing faster than she had expected. She touched his forehead lightly with her glowing fingers, and a wave of calm washed through him. Daniel realized that Lyra was sharing some of her strength with him, and he thanked her quietly. The bond was becoming strong enough that Daniel could now feel her thoughts brushing against his even when they were not intentionally connecting. He started to understand fragments of her language and her species' unique way of viewing the universe. At the same time, he learned more about her tragic past. Through small flashes of memory, he saw how her people had been hunted by a ruthless enemy fleet, leaving their worlds in ruins. Lyra carried the weight of that loss every moment, and Daniel's heart ached for her. He wanted to ask more about the enemy, but Lyra warned him that focusing on the pain of the past would only weaken the bond. She told him instead to focus on trust, because the final stage would require them both to open their minds completely. If either of them held back even a little, the connection could collapse and harm them both. Daniel nodded, though he could not help feeling anxious. As the ship moved deeper into the uncharted sector, Daniel began to notice other things as well. The crew was becoming uneasy with Lyra's presence, though they did not say it openly. They were not comfortable with the way she and Daniel seemed to share unspoken words and glances. One crew member even muttered that it felt unnatural. Daniel tried to ignore the comments, but a part of him wondered if they were right. That night, as Daniel stared out at the endless stars, Lyra joined him quietly. Without asking, she reached out and linked her mind to his with a gentle touch. He felt warmth flow through him, and his worries melted away. She told him that she could feel his doubt and that it was normal, but he had to trust the bond they were building. She promised him that one day soon, this connection might be the key to saving not just them, but many others. Daniel looked into her glowing eyes and felt the sincerity in her words. For the first time, he realized that this was not just training. For him, Lyra was depending on him in a way far deeper than he had understood. He vowed silently that he would not let her down. What neither of them knew was that far beyond their ship, the same enemy fleet that had destroyed Lyra's people had picked up traces of their vessel. They were already closing in on the sector, and time was running out. The following days passed quickly as Daniel and Lyra continued their training, but there was an undercurrent of tension in the air that none of the crew could ignore. The ship was traveling deeper into unknown space, and the captain had received fragments of strange signals that seemed to echo across the void, as if another presence was out there watching them. Daniel felt it too, in the back of his mind, a quiet pressure that made him uneasy, though he tried to stay focused on the bond he was building with Lyra. Each session became more intense than the last as she guided him through the next stages of mind bonding. Daniel had learned to quiet his thoughts, and now she was teaching him how to open them fully to another mind. He struggled at first, because it went against everything he had ever known. Humans guarded their memories and emotions closely, but Lyra told him that true connection required letting go of every barrier. She demonstrated by showing him pieces of her own life, so clearly he felt as if he had lived them himself. He saw her as a young child running through glowing streets with friends, whose laughter still echoed in her heart. He felt the pride she had when she joined her people's council, and the crushing fear when the enemy fleets arrived out of nowhere. Daniel found himself overwhelmed by the weight of what she carried, yet he did not pull away. He wanted to understand her pain, because it was the only way to truly bond. When it was his turn to open up, he hesitated, but Lyra's calm presence gave him strength. He let her see his childhood on Earth, the loss of his parents when he was still young, and the loneliness he sometimes felt even among his crew. He let her feel his hopes and fears, the small dreams he had kept buried deep inside. The connection deepened in a way that left Daniel breathless. He no longer needed to guess how Lyra felt, because her emotions flowed into him. like a warm river, and he realized that she could feel his in the same way. There were no lies between them, no masks to hide behind. It was both frightening and liberating. One evening after a long session, Daniel remained seated in the meditation chamber, unable to move. His mind was buzzing from the sheer intensity of the bond they had just formed. Lyra knelt beside him and told him he was closer than ever to completing the final stage. She warned him again of the risks. If one of them faltered during the last step, their minds could shatter under the pressure. Daniel listened quietly, then looked into her glowing eyes and told her he was ready. But the situation outside their training was growing worse. The captain had detected more of the strange signals and was becoming increasingly concerned. He called Daniel to the bridge and explained that the signals matched faintly with an old archive Lyra had provided about the enemy fleet. They were not sure yet, but it seemed likely that the same force that had destroyed her people was heading their way. Daniel's stomach tightened at the thought. He returned to Lyra and told her what the captain had said. Lyra's face was unreadable for a long moment. Then she admitted she had feared this possibility from the beginning. She told Daniel that if the enemy had found them, their ship stood little chance of surviving a direct attack. She believed that the only way they could hope to outmaneuver the fleet was through the completed mind bond, because it would allow them to merge their knowledge and instincts into one. Daniel felt the weight of her words settle heavily on his shoulders. He knew what she was saying was true, yet the final stage terrified him. He remembered how close his mind had come to breaking during their last session, and this would be even more intense. Still, he did not hesitate for long. He told Lyra that he would do whatever it took to protect their crew, and she nodded solemnly. As the crew prepared the ship for the possibility of combat, Daniel and Lyra retreated once more into the meditation chamber. This time there was no small talk or preparation. They both knew what was at stake. Daniel closed his eyes and felt Lyra's presence surround him like a warm embrace. She guided him gently through the first steps and then asked him to let go completely. He did as she asked, and the world seemed to fall away. Daniel felt himself being pulled deeper and deeper into the bond. Memories blurred together until he could no longer tell where his life ended and Lyra's began. He felt her heartbeat as if it were his own and heard his thoughts echo in her mind. There was no separation between them, only a single shared consciousness that was stronger than either of them alone. For a moment Daniel thought he might lose himself entirely, but then he felt Lyra's strength wrap around him, holding him steady. She whispered in his mind that he was doing better than she had ever imagined, and that the bond was nearly complete. Daniel focused on her voice and let it guide him through the final barrier. When the connection fully locked into place, Daniel gasped aloud, his body trembling from the sheer power flowing through him. He could feel everything Lyra felt, every sensation, every thought, every fragment of knowledge she possessed. It was overwhelming but also incredible. He understood now why mind bonding was considered sacred among her people. Lyra opened her eyes and Daniel realized they were glowing brighter than before. She told him they had succeeded and that their bond was now unbreakable. They would be able to think and act as one, and together they might stand a chance against the enemy fleet. Daniel nodded, though his heart was racing. He knew what was coming would test them more than anything they had ever faced. Out in the darkness of space, the enemy ships had already begun to close the distance, their engines burning bright as they prepared for attack. The crew of Daniel's ship watched the sensors in silence, fear creeping into their eyes. But Daniel felt none of that fear anymore, because he could feel Lyra's determination flowing into him like a fire. He stood with her at the center of the ship, ready for whatever came next. The tension inside the ship was almost unbearable as the enemy fleet came into view on the long-range sensors. Red markers appeared on the screen one after another until the display was crowded with them. And the captain's voice shook as he ordered everyone to their stations. The crew moved quickly, but Daniel could sense the fear in each of them. He could feel it because of his new connection with Lyra, which was amplifying his awareness of everyone around him. She stood beside him, calm and steady, her glowing eyes fixed on the screen as if she was already thinking several moves ahead. Daniel felt her thoughts flow into his mind like a steady current, guiding him to the right choices. She showed him images of enemy ships, their weaknesses, and their usual tactics. He realized she had fought these ships before and knew them better than anyone. For the first time he felt truly confident that they had a chance even against such overwhelming numbers. The enemy fleet sent out a warning broadcast, but it was not a negotiation. The harsh metallic voice declared that all survivors would be taken as prisoners and the ship destroyed. The captain looked at Daniel, unsure of what to do, but Daniel already knew their only option was to fight. He could feel Lyra's agreement inside his mind. They both understood that surrender meant death or worse. The first enemy ship opened fire, and the crew was thrown forward as explosions rippled across the hull. Sparks flew from the consoles and alarms blared through every corridor. Daniel reached for Lyra's hand, and immediately the noise around him faded. The mind bond flared brightly, and their thoughts became one. They moved together toward the control center, where the captain reluctantly gave them command, knowing they were the only ones who could save them. Daniel's senses sharpened as he sat at the controls. It was as if he could feel the ship's engines and weapons like extensions of his own body. Lyra guided him, showing him exactly when to dodge and when to strike. Their first maneuver was so sudden and precise that the enemy ships hesitated for a moment, not expecting such skill from a small exploration vessel. Daniel used that hesitation to fire a concentrated burst at the nearest enemy cruiser, tearing through its shields and sending it spinning out of formation. The crew erupted in cheers, but Daniel did not pause. He could feel Lyra's urgency pressing at him. There were too many ships to celebrate now. They darted through the battlefield, weaving between blasts of plasma fire, their combined instincts allowing them to anticipate every move the enemy made. Daniel could almost see the enemy pilots through Lyra's memories, and he knew how to stay one step ahead. Another enemy ship exploded in a blinding flash, but the others were adapting quickly. They began to surround the smaller vessel, forcing Daniel and Lyra into a tighter and tighter space. The captain shouted that the shields would not hold for much longer, and Daniel felt sweat run down his face as he searched for a solution. Lyra's voice spoke clearly in his mind, telling him to trust her. She shared a complex strategy with him in an instant, a plan so intricate he would never have thought of it on his own. They angled the ship sharply downward, diving toward the gravity well of a nearby planet. The enemy followed close behind, firing continuously, but Daniel kept the ship steady, trusting Lyra's instructions. Just as the enemy closed in, they skimmed the edge of the planet's upper atmosphere and used the sudden gravitational pull to slingshot around it. The enemy ships were caught off guard, and two of them collided with each other in the chaos. Daniel felt a surge of hope as they broke free of the trap, but he knew it was not over yet. The enemy's flagship was still out there, and it was far stronger than the others. Its weapons locked onto them and fired a beam so powerful it nearly tore through the ship's core. Systems flickered and alarms blared once more. Daniel gritted his teeth and felt Lyra's hand tighten around his. She told him silently that this was the moment. Everything they had trained for would matter. They poured every bit of their energy into the bond. Daniel felt his consciousness expand until he could sense the entire battlefield as clearly as if he were floating above it. He saw where every enemy ship was moving, and he understood exactly how to dismantle them piece by piece. He guided the ship with impossible precision, and Lyra focused their combined strength into one devastating strike. The enemy flagship tried to evade, but they were faster. Daniel locked the targeting system on its power core and fired. The beam cut through the flagship's shields, and the explosion lit up the darkness of space like a second sun. The shockwave sent the remaining enemy ships scattering in panic. For a long moment, the crew was silent, unable to believe what they had just witnessed. Then cheers erupted across the bridge, and Daniel slumped forward, exhausted but alive. He felt Lyra's presence steady and strong inside his mind. She told him they had done what even her people had not believed possible. They had defeated the enemy not through numbers or weapons, but through unity of mind and heart. Daniel opened his eyes and saw the crew looking at him with a mix of relief and awe. He tried to explain that it was not just him but Lyra as well, yet he realized they already understood. The bond between him and the alien woman was obvious to everyone now. As the ship moved away from the battlefield, Daniel could still feel Lyra's emotions washing through him. There was pride, but also sadness for the lives lost in the fight, and for her people who had been gone long before. Daniel reached out to her, silently promising that their victory would not be the end but the beginning of something greater. Far behind them, the wreckage of the enemy fleet drifted silently through the void, a reminder of the battle they had survived. But Daniel knew the true challenge was yet to come. They had won this fight, but Lyra's species was still scattered and broken. Their bond had given them the strength to survive. Now it would have to guide them into a future worth fighting for. Ships sailed quietly through the open stretch of space, leaving behind the shattered remains of the enemy fleet, and the crew was still recovering from the battle. The bridge was no longer filled with alarm sounds or shouting, but with the soft murmur of tired voices as people checked on each other and repaired the damaged systems. Daniel sat near the observation window with Lyra by his side, both of them silent as they stared at the stars. He could still feel the echo of the battle in his mind, but he also felt something else, a steady warmth that came from the unbreakable bond they had forged. Lyra turned her glowing eyes toward him, and he felt her gratitude flow into his thoughts. Even before she spoke, she told him that what they had done together was more than victory. It was hope. For the first time in years, she could imagine a future for her people, even if that future was only a faint possibility. Daniel listened quietly, then told her he would help her rebuild no matter how long it took. He had seen her memories of her homeworld and the beauty of her people's culture, and he could not bear to let it fade into history. The captain approached and informed them that the crew had voted unanimously to follow Lyra's guidance to the nearest known refuge where other survivors of her species might be found. The journey would be long, but the crew no longer questioned the importance of what Daniel and Lyra were doing. They had seen firsthand how the mind bond had saved them, and they trusted it. Daniel thanked the captain and promised that he and Lyra would stand with the crew in whatever challenges lay ahead. During the long voyage, Lyra and Daniel spent hours in the meditation chamber, strengthening their bond even further. At times they no longer needed words at all because they could understand each other's thoughts and emotions completely. Daniel was amazed by how natural it felt to share his mind so openly. He realized that the bond had changed him forever. He was no longer the same man who had stood nervously on a derelict alien ship weeks ago, unsure if he could handle this strange connection. Now he could not imagine life without it. One evening, Lyra shared a vision with him of a hidden sanctuary, deep within a cluster of nebula clouds where she believed some of her people might have fled. Daniel felt her hope surge through him, and he promised they would find it together. He began working with the captain to adjust their course, using the knowledge Lyra provided through the bond. Every time he made a decision, he could feel her mind brushing against his, guiding him, and it felt as though they were truly one being with one purpose. As the days turned into weeks, the crew began to notice something different about Daniel. He seemed calmer, more focused, and at times he moved with an instinct that was almost uncanny. They understood it was because of the bond with Lyra, but instead of fearing it, they found comfort in it. The bond had saved their lives, and now it was leading them to a better future. Finally, after a long, intense journey, the ship reached the edge of the nebula clouds. The colorful gases swirled like a living ocean, and sensors struggled to penetrate the dense interference. Daniel felt a flicker of doubt, but Lyra's voice inside his mind soothed him, telling him to trust her instincts. He guided the ship deeper into the nebula, and soon they detected faint energy signatures ahead. The crew held their breath as a cluster of small vessels came into view. At first the ships raised their weapons, unsure who the intruders were. Then a message was transmitted in a language Daniel did not understand. Lyra responded in her own tongue, and a moment later the ships lowered their weapons. One by one, they moved closer until Daniel could see the alien faces through the viewports. They were like Lyra, with the same luminous eyes, though many carried the scars of hardship. When the refugees boarded the ship, the reunion was emotional. Lyra stepped forward and greeted them, and Daniel felt the waves of relief and joy in her mind. She introduced Daniel to her people, explaining how he had helped her survive and how the mind bond between them had allowed them to defeat the enemy fleet. The survivors listened in awe, and for the first time in a long while, Daniel felt truly accepted by being so different from himself. That night there was no meditation or training, only quiet conversations and plans for the future. Lyra's people shared stories of scattered survivors who might still be out there waiting to be found. Daniel realized the mission had only just begun. He told Lyra that he and the crew would stay with her as long as she needed, and he meant it. He had seen through the bond how much the survival of her species meant to her, and now it meant the same to him. As the ship prepared to set off once more, Daniel stood with Lyra on the observation deck. They looked out at the endless stars, knowing that the journey ahead would not be easy, but also knowing they would face it together. Lyra reached out and took Daniel's hand, and he felt the bond flare warmly between them. She told him silently that he had given her people a chance to live again, and he replied that she had given him something just as valuable, a purpose that would never fade. The stars shimmered brightly across the vast darkness, and Daniel felt a sense of peace he had never known before. He was no longer just a man on an exploration mission. He was part of something greater, something that could shape the future of two species. With Lyra by his side and the bond connecting their hearts and minds, he knew they could overcome whatever challenges the universe placed in their path. The engines roared to life, and the ship turned toward a new course, leaving the nebula behind. Daniel felt the presence of Lyra's people all around him, and the crew standing strong together. For the first time he felt that this was not just survival, but the beginning of a new chapter for everyone. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting the warmth of the bond fill him, and when he opened them again, the stars ahead seemed brighter than ever. The end.